The first time I saw Rachel, she was working at this tiny coffee shop near my office, a little independent place with creaky floors and mismatched chairs. She wore this oversized sweatshirt with paint smudges on the cuffs and had her hair twisted up in a way that said she didn't really care if anyone was looking. She was scribbling in a notebook between pouring lattes, biting the inside of her cheek like whatever she was writing mattered more than the orders. I went there 3 days in a row before she finally looked at me and said, "You order like you're stalling for something." I think I made some dumb comment about caffeine and spreadsheets, and she just raised her eyebrows like she'd heard it all before. That was how it started, casual, then kind of inevitable. We started talking more. I started staying longer. She didn't flirt exactly, but she paid attention. And after a couple of weeks, she slipped me a napkin with a phone number and a sketch of a coffee cup that looked suspiciously like mine. Rachel was different. She wasn't polished. She didn't say what people wanted to hear. But she saw things, people, especially, in this raw, unfiltered way that made you feel both exposed and understood at the same time. I worked in finance, lived by my Google Calendar, owned 5 identical dress shirts. I was drawn to her like gravity. We dated for a little over 2 years before getting married. Nothing extravagant, just a backyard setup at her friend's place. String lights, takeout trays, a Bluetooth speaker. We wrote our own vows. I don't even remember mine completely, but I remember hers. She said, "I don't believe in fairy tales, but I believe in showing up." And I promised to show up every day. That stuck with me. After the wedding, life clicked into a rhythm. I kept my job at the firm. She left the coffee shop and started picking up freelance work, mostly graphic design, some branding packages, even a few commissions that came through Instagram. She turned the spare bedroom into a studio, big desk, sketch pads everywhere, tablet always charging, a ring light she used for video consults. I'd come home some nights and she'd be in there in her sweats, music playing, 3 mugs half full of tea she'd forgotten to finish. We didn't fight much. Rachel had her moods, especially when a client ghosted her or a project stalled. I tended to internalize stress, which meant there were times I'd go quiet for a couple days after a rough week. But we always circled back. We had dinners, sometimes late, sometimes just takeout, and we'd sit on the floor with plates on the coffee table, talking while a movie played in the background. Kids came up once in a while, but we never made it a plan. She said she wasn't ready. Wanted to keep figuring herself out. I understood. I figured when the time was right, we'd know. We weren't flashy. We weren't Instagram perfect. But it felt stable. It felt real. I believed we knew each other in the ways that mattered. Rachel had always been good at making things feel that way. Rachel always called herself a functional introvert. She didn't like big groups, avoided parties unless she absolutely had to go, and kept her social circle tight. She had 2 close friends, Leah, a photographer she'd known since college, and Mira, a tattoo artist who lived across town. Most of their conversations happened through texts and late-night FaceTime calls. I liked that about her, how low maintenance she was with people. It made our life feel quieter, more contained. Weekends were our time. We'd sleep in, cook breakfast too late to be called breakfast, and wander the farmer's market if the weather was decent. She always picked out weird herbs or handmade soaps we didn't need, but she liked the experience. We had this little ritual on Sundays: homemade pizza, open a bottle of wine, music instead of a movie. She'd sit cross-legged on the counter while I rolled out dough, and she'd tell me about her week even if I'd already heard half of it in real time. Her work stayed consistent. She had a steady rotation of clients and picked up one-off jobs pretty frequently. A lot of her projects came through referral or social media. She had a decent following on Instagram, where she posted snippets of her artwork and design mock-ups. She never showed her face much, said she liked keeping some distance between her life and her brand. I didn't ask questions. I respected her space. That's how we worked: give each other breathing room, trust that whatever the other person was doing, it came from a good place. My job, on the other hand, was predictable to a fault. Meetings, reports, financial projections, rinse and repeat. I made good money, which allowed Rachel the flexibility to be more selective with her clients. She said she appreciated that. Said it made her feel like she didn't have to say yes to every exhausting gig that came her way. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We had enough for weekend trips, last-minute dinners, and slowly furnishing our place the way we wanted. Rachel was big on details. She once spent 2 hours comparing lamp styles for the living room. I didn't care what we bought, as long as she was happy. She made the space feel like home, and I liked coming back to that after long days. Sometimes I'd come home and she'd be working in the studio, headphones in, completely lost in her screen. She always had one tab open to a digital canvas, another with color palettes, and a third where she jotted notes that didn't seem to make sense to anyone but her. It all looked like chaos, but she made it work. That was Rachel, a little disorganized, a little chaotic, but talented, intuitive, focused when it counted. We went through a stretch that fall where we were especially in sync. No tension, no weird silences, no drifting. We were making more time for each other, dates, longer conversations, nights in bed that didn't involve phones or laptops. It felt easy again. Effortless, even. That winter, Rachel started getting into photography again, something she hadn't really touched since college. It wasn't anything serious at first. She'd take her camera out on walks, shoot some neighborhood photos, mess with lighting setups in the living room. She said it helped her see things differently, gave her a break from staring at her screen for hours on end. I liked watching her work. She was meticulous when it came to angles and framing, but never stiff. She'd adjust things without overthinking, always chasing the light across the walls like it owed her something. The house became part studio, part gallery. One day it was the dining room table turned into a flat lay, the next it was her standing on the couch, aiming down at the floor where she'd arranged props and a piece of fabric she claimed had texture. It was a creative mess, and I didn't mind it. My schedule stayed packed through the end of the quarter. I was coming home later again, but Rachel never made me feel bad about it. She'd leave dinner in the oven, or we'd eat late, sitting together even if we were both too tired to talk much. Sometimes she'd wait up for me, sketchbook open on her lap, legs tucked under a blanket on the couch. She worked mostly from home, though she said she occasionally met clients for consultations, usually in cafes or co-working spaces downtown. She mentioned getting more interest through referrals lately, especially for branding packages, which I took to mean logos and design work for small businesses. She always handled the creative side of her world. I never felt the need to check in beyond asking, "How's it going?" Most days, the house was quiet when I left for work. Rachel liked sleeping in a little, said she did her best work at night. I'd bring her coffee to her side of the bed before I left, just a small thing, but she always smiled when I did. Her hair would be messy, her voice still heavy from sleep, and she'd mumble something like, "You're my favorite human," before curling up again. We made plans to take a weekend trip in the spring. Nothing fancy, just a drive upstate, a small cabin rental near some trails. Rachel said she wanted to unplug for real, get away from Wi-Fi and responsibilities. She found a place with no TV and a fireplace. I booked it right away. We also started looking at new furniture. Our couch was getting worn down, and Rachel had a Pinterest board full of ideas. We spent a Saturday hopping between furniture stores, testing chairs, disagreeing about styles in a way that was more playful than anything else. She kept leaning toward mid-century modern, I kept asking which one was easiest to clean. She rolled her eyes, but always with a smile. It felt good, easy, settled, full of tiny moments that gave our days shape. There wasn't anything dramatic. Just life, unfolding in its own rhythm. By early spring, Rachel's routine had shifted a little. She was working later into the evenings, staying up long after I'd gone to bed. I didn't think much of it. Her projects were piling up, a good sign, financially. She told me she'd landed a few new clients, one of whom needed help launching an online store, another with a full rebrand. The kind of work she'd always said she wanted to attract. Her studio space was still her sanctuary. I never interrupted her in there unless she called me in to ask for an opinion on fonts or color pairings. Sometimes I'd walk by late at night and hear her humming to herself, or the click of her mouse as she jumped between programs. Her door was often closed, but I assumed that was just her way of keeping focused. I respected that. Weekends were still ours, but more low-key. A lot of mornings with music playing from the speaker in the kitchen, Rachel dancing barefoot while she waited for the kettle to boil. We'd spend afternoons grocery shopping together or going on walks when the weather allowed. There was a local park we both liked, quiet trails, just enough uphill to make it feel like we were doing something. Rachel brought her camera a few times. She liked taking shots of tree bark textures, puddles, cloud reflections. Said they made great background elements for client projects. It was her language. I didn't question it. One thing I always appreciated was how she didn't bring unnecessary drama into our lives. We didn't have shouting matches. We didn't air dirty laundry with friends. If something was wrong, she'd talk to me, at least, that's what I believed. We had our little disagreements, of course. Usually about who forgot to refill the Brita, or how long the laundry sat in the dryer. But nothing heavy. Nothing that lingered past a day. Finances were in a good place. My bonus came through, and we used some of it to finish the guest room. Rachel had wanted to repaint it for months. We spent a weekend clearing it out, taping edges, trying not to snap at each other about drop cloths. She picked a soft green. Said it felt like somewhere you could breathe. It looked great by the end of the weekend. We added a few new throw pillows, a small bookshelf, and a painting Rachel found online from an independent artist. It turned out to be her favorite room in the house. Sometimes I'd come home to find her sitting in there instead of her studio. She said the light was better. She'd work on her tablet with her legs tucked under her, big headphones on, lost in whatever she was doing. She'd glance up when I walked in and smile like nothing in the world could touch her in that moment. I liked that smile. I trusted it. Our anniversary was coming up. 5 years. We talked about taking a small trip, maybe the coast, or a few days in the mountains. She didn't want anything big, just time. That's all she ever asked for, really. Presence. Conversation. Space to be herself. And I gave her all of it, without hesitation. The first time I felt it, that tiny, invisible shift, was over something forgettable. A charger, of all things. It was a Tuesday night. I'd left my phone cord at the office and went to borrow Rachel's. I walked into the studio while she was in the kitchen, just meaning to grab it and go, but her desk setup caught my eye. 2 monitors going. One of them had several windows open, graphic design stuff, it looked like nothing unusual. But something about the way the screen minimized automatically when I bumped the mouse made me pause. I didn't think anything of it at first. She was probably just working on a client presentation and didn't want the files to get messed up. Still, when she came back and saw me standing there, she flinched slightly, just a flash across her face before she smiled. Need something? Your charger, I said. Phone's dead. She handed it over. That was it. No awkwardness. No tension. But I'd seen her on that same computer 100 times before. She'd never been that quick to minimize things, and I'd never felt the need to wonder what she was working on. That night, lying next to her, I told myself not to overthink it. But I couldn't help it. The image kept replaying, the swift motion, the closed window, that micro-expression that didn't quite match the moment. Over the next week, I noticed other things. Small details that didn't point to anything in particular, but collectively tugged at something in the back of my mind. Her work hours had shifted again. She was staying up later, sometimes until 2 or 3 a.m., and not always in her studio. Once or twice, I woke up to find her in the guest room with the door closed and the light spilling out from underneath. When I asked what she was working on, she said she'd gotten a few clients in different time zones. One was in Australia. One in the UK. It's just easier to stay up than to fight for calendar overlap, she told me. Made sense. Kind of. But then there were other moments, like how her phone was suddenly never in the open anymore. She used to leave it face up on the counter, or charging on her nightstand. Now it was always in her pocket or tucked under her arm, even when she was just walking from room to room. Once, I asked her if she'd gotten a new case. She had, actually. One of those folio covers that shielded the whole screen. Helps keep it from cracking, she said. It wasn't suspicious on its own. But it was different. And different has a way of getting under your skin when everything else is the same. I didn't bring any of it up. I didn't want to seem paranoid. Rachel wasn't the kind of person to sneak around. She was direct, honest, independent. We'd built our relationship on trust, and I wasn't going to throw that away over a few late nights and a phone case. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slightly out of alignment. Not wrong. Just, off. It wasn't long before I stopped chalking it up to stress or work. I started noticing gaps. Not in time, but in explanation. Little inconsistencies that seemed harmless on their own but didn't fit neatly with what I knew of Rachel's habits. I came home early one Friday. We'd wrapped a quarterly meeting ahead of schedule, and I figured I'd surprise her with takeout and a night off. She wasn't in the studio when I got in. The door was closed, lights off. But I heard movement upstairs. I found her in the guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed in a loose hoodie, laptop open, her face flushed like she'd just finished running. She looked startled, not panicked, just not prepared. "Hey," I said. "Didn't expect me?" "No, I just lost track of time. I thought you had a late meeting." "I did. Ended early." She smiled and shut the laptop quickly, folding it into her arms. "I was watching a live stream. Leah's doing those now, photography tutorials." I nodded slowly. "Cool." She stood up, kissed me on the cheek like nothing was weird at all, and asked what I was holding. I'd forgotten I still had the takeout bag in my hand. "Thai," I said. "Figured we could eat and crash early." "Perfect," she said, already walking past me. And that was it. We had dinner. We watched a movie. She went to bed early and said she had a headache. But that odd flush in her cheeks, it lingered in my mind for hours. Later that week, I tried to find Leah's tutorials online. I wasn't checking up on Rachel, at least, that's what I told myself. I was just curious. I found Leah's portfolio site, her socials, even a YouTube channel with maybe 3 videos, all of which had been posted months ago. Nothing live. Nothing recent. I didn't say anything. Instead, I watched more carefully. Rachel still worked late. Still spent most of that time in the guest room instead of her studio. She stopped mentioning specific clients. Before, she used to tell me all about the people she worked with, the ones who made weird logo requests, the ones who micromanaged color palettes. Now it was just another rebrand, or a marketing campaign thing. The ring light she used for video calls had been moved. It used to stay fixed on her desk. Now it was on a portable tripod, and sometimes it wasn't there at all. I saw it once tucked behind the door in the guest room. She said she was trying new lighting setups for product photos. Made sense. Kind of. But it was a lot of shifting. A lot of closed doors. A lot of explanations that arrived a little too quickly. I started hearing faint noises at night when I got up to use the bathroom, voices, sometimes, coming from behind that guest room door. Not TV level loud. Just, conversation. Her voice. A man's voice, once or twice, distorted by headphones or speakers, I couldn't tell. But I never caught anything solid. I told myself it was part of a project. A new gig. Something creative. I told myself that because I needed to believe it. By the time April rolled in, I had memorized the sound of that door closing. The guest room, once just an afterthought space, had become Rachel's new headquarters. She insisted it was because the light was better, and that it helped her separate work from play. But more and more, it felt like she was building a wall, not between work and life, but between her world and mine. She still smiled. Still kissed me good morning. Still asked how my day was. But there was a delay in everything, like she had to remember her lines before delivering them. Her warmth hadn't vanished, but it felt dialed in, like a loop she was running through because she knew I expected it. One night, I woke up around 2:30 a.m. and realized she still wasn't in bed. I padded down the hallway, careful not to step on that one floorboard that creaked near the linen closet. The guest room door was closed, but not fully, just enough for a sliver of blue light to stretch across the carpet. I didn't knock. I just waited. I could hear her voice, soft but steady, talking, not in conversation, more like performance. Paired with it was another sound, quieter, hard to place at first. Then I heard laughter. Not hers. A man's voice, then another. My pulse kicked up a notch. I took one small step closer and gently pushed the door open another inch. Just enough to glimpse the light from her laptop screen bouncing off the wall. Then silence. She must have seen something, maybe the movement in the hallway, or a flicker of shadow. The screen dimmed. Her voice stopped. A beat later, she called out, casual as ever. "Babe? You okay?" "Yeah," I said, pretending I hadn't moved. "Just getting water." She didn't press. Neither did I. But the next day, the ring light was gone again. The door stayed shut tighter. The hallway light, which we always used as a nightlight, was left off. A week later, I walked into the kitchen and found a second phone charging on the far end of the counter. It wasn't hers, or at least, not one I recognized. It had a glittery pink case with no lock screen photo. Just a clock. I picked it up instinctively, but the second I did, Rachel walked in. Her eyes locked on the phone. "That's old," she said quickly. "Just a backup. I use it for Instagram logins when I need a clean browser." I set it down without a word. But that night, I laid in bed next to her, wide awake, while she slept easily beside me. I watched the ceiling, counting the passing of each car by the faint sweep of headlights through our blinds. I still had no proof. No confrontation. Nothing I could point to and say, "This is what you're hiding." But my gut was talking now. And it wasn't whispering anymore. It was a Tuesday when everything cracked open. Not a dramatic day. Not a fight, not an argument. Just one of those ordinary moments that turns into a before and after. My work laptop died around noon, screen frozen, the thing humming like it was about to combust. I had a report due, no time to get to the office, and all I needed was a browser and a file. Rachel was out running errands, so I figured I'd just borrow hers for an hour. She'd left it open on the kitchen counter, plugged into the wall like she hadn't planned to be gone long. I opened the lid and clicked into the browser. It was already up, a few tabs running, mostly what I expected. Email, some design portfolio site, a color palette generator. Then I saw one I didn't recognize. The icon was small, white and pink, with a symbol that looked vaguely like a camera. At first, I thought it was Pinterest. Maybe some niche tool for her work. I clicked. The page loaded in seconds, fast, too fast, like it had been opened recently. And then I saw it. The name at the top. The video player in the center. The thumbnail, paused on an image that froze something in my chest. It was Rachel. Not in a professional setting. Not in anything resembling her studio work. She was seated on the edge of our guest room bed, wearing something I had never seen before, lingerie, red lighting, camera angled low. There were chat bubbles beside the video. Comments. Tips. Men's usernames scrolling in real time, reacting with emojis and messages I couldn't bring myself to read all the way through. I sat there, not breathing. I scrolled down and saw a list, archived broadcasts. Names like Late Night Session and Private Show, by request only. All of them time-stamped. Frequent. Some were titled with numbers. Some had dates that matched nights she said she was working late. Others lined up perfectly with those unexplained client calls. The chat room was still open, still live. The webcam site interface showed notifications. A new message popped up. "Where'd you go, Angel? Waiting on that private show." I slammed the laptop shut and just stared at it. My hand was shaking. My jaw locked so tightly I thought my teeth might crack. I stood up and walked in circles around the kitchen. Once. Twice. 3 times. I kept waiting to wake up. But I didn't. I opened it again, slower this time, and started digging through the tabs. There were payout records. Thousands of dollars. Notes she'd kept on regulars, usernames, requests, time zones. She hadn't just been broadcasting. She was building a business around it. Scheduling private sessions. Inviting specific men. Sometimes streaming with more than one in the frame. I recognized our bedding. The throw pillow from our living room. The string lights we bought for the guest room makeover. Everything she had done, every late night, every locked door, every laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes, it had all been happening in this house. Under this roof. In our shared space. Not just betrayal. Exposure. Deliberate, intentional, constant. I closed the browser and left the laptop exactly where it was. Then I walked upstairs, opened the guest room door, and sat on the bed where she'd been performing for strangers. The sheets were clean. But I felt sick. I didn't speak to her the moment she came home. I didn't even look up from the kitchen table as she walked in with grocery bags slung over her arm, sunglasses in her hair, humming something under her breath. She stopped when she saw me. Maybe it was the way I was sitting, too still, too quiet, or maybe she already knew. "Hey," she said cautiously. "Everything okay?" I nodded once, then turned the laptop toward her. I didn't say a word. Just pressed play. The video started. Her face, on our bed. Her voice, sugar-sweet and unfamiliar. Her smile, not the one I knew, but something tailored, false, hungry. She froze when she saw it. A full-body pause, like something had sucked the air out of her lungs. "Wait," she started. I stood up so fast the chair scraped back against the tile. "Don't. Just don't." She put the bags down slowly, like if she moved quietly enough, it would all reverse itself. "I can explain." "You don't get to explain. You had men in our house. You filmed this in our home, on our bed, in the room where we were supposed to have a guest nursery one day. I've been sitting across from you at dinner, sleeping beside you, while you've been putting on a show for strangers." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I walked past her, up the stairs, grabbed a laundry basket and started pulling her things out of the closet, dresses, jeans, jackets, the hoodie she wore when she worked late. I moved like I wasn't even in my body anymore. My hands didn't shake. I was done shaking. She followed me up. "Please. It's not what you think." "Really?" I turned on her, basket in my arms. "Because what I think is that for months, maybe years, you've been lying to my face while turning this house into your private little stage. I think you've disgraced the hell out of our life and our marriage. And I think you should get out. I carried her things downstairs and dumped them on the porch. Shoes, makeup bag, hard drives, all of it. "You're throwing me out?" she asked, standing there, stunned. "You threw yourself out," I said. "You just forgot to pack." She started crying. Real or not, I didn't care anymore. I told her to get in the car. She refused. Said she needed to explain. So I got louder. Said if she didn't come with me now, I'd call her family and show them exactly what she'd been doing. She caved. I drove her across town in silence. The whole way, she stared out the window, wiping at her face like that would erase what had happened. I didn't take her to a hotel. I took her to her sister's, the one person I knew who might still listen to her. I pulled up, got out, dumped her bags on the curb, and didn't wait for anyone to answer the door. She begged me not to make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw punches. I just looked at her and said, "I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow. Don't come back. You're blocked on everything. And if anyone asks why, I'll tell them the truth." Then I got in the car. And left her standing there, surrounded by everything she'd just lost. The next morning, I changed every password. Bank accounts, shared logins, streaming services, anything that had her name on it was reset or closed. I went to the courthouse and filed for divorce, citing emotional betrayal and misconduct. My lawyer didn't even blink when I explained what happened. He'd seen worse, he said, but nodded when I told him I wanted it done fast, airtight, no loopholes. The house felt cleaner without her in it. Not physically, her stuff had only been gone a few hours, but the air felt lighter. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was relief. A quiet I didn't realize I'd been missing. That evening, I started making calls. Her parents were first. I didn't give them a soft version. I told them exactly what I found, the videos, the live streams, the chat rooms, the tips from strangers while she sat half-naked on our bed pretending she didn't have a husband just a few doors down the hall. Her mother cried. Her father hung up on me. But I didn't care. They deserved to know. Next were our mutual friends. Not out of spite, I wasn't looking for drama, but because the story would come out one way or another, and I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. I kept it simple. Direct. Honest. She had a second life. And it wasn't just cheating, it was public. Broadcast. Business-level betrayal. Some of them were shocked. Some weren't. A few admitted they'd noticed something was off about her lately, especially online. I asked what they meant. Apparently, Rachel had built a second identity. Different social handles, all private, where she promoted her shows under a fake name. None of them followed her there, but a couple had heard rumors. She got bold, one of them said. Almost like she wanted to get caught. The last thing I did that night was block her number. Phone. Email. Every account she could possibly reach me through. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want excuses. She'd made her choices in secret, so she could deal with the consequences in the open. I didn't speak to her again. She tried, of course. Through a burner number. Then through her sister. Then through one of our friends. I shut it all down. The only thing I wanted from her was her signature on the divorce papers, and even that, I was ready to get through the court if she refused. Within a week, her public profiles were deleted. Her business site disappeared. Clients vanished. Friends dropped off. Her sister texted me once, saying Rachel was a mess, that she couldn't believe how fast everything collapsed. I didn't answer. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. She had built a secret world, brick by brick, behind my back. And I'd knocked the whole thing down, with one browser tab. The divorce was finalized in less than 2 months. She didn't contest anything. No plea for reconciliation. No attempt at damage control. Just a flat signature on the papers and a silence that stretched so wide it barely felt real. My lawyer said it was the smoothest process he'd seen for something so messy. There were no shared kids, no property battles, no long negotiations. Just the clean severing of two lives that had never been as intertwined as I thought. Afterward, I boxed up everything she'd left behind, the scarves stuffed in the hall closet, a few sketchbooks under the bed, a photo album she hadn't touched in years. I dropped it all at her sister's porch, same as before. No note. No message. Just closure in cardboard. I took time off from work, just a couple of weeks, to sit with the quiet. Not to sulk, not to spiral, but to take inventory of the life I was rebuilding. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself, it was realizing how long I'd been loving someone who'd already stepped out of our life. In those early days, people reached out with sympathy, with disbelief, with the usual recycled lines, "You didn't deserve that." I never would have guessed. She always seemed so grounded. I thanked them and kept my replies short. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't interested in revenge or pity. I just wanted distance. Rachel vanished from our social world. No new posts. No updates. From what little I heard through scattered friends, she tried to rebuild under a new name, different handle, different city, different everything. But her face had already been passed around. Enough people had seen what I'd seen. Her story wasn't just mine anymore. It had traveled, and it stuck. I didn't care where she ended up. She made her choice. And I made mine. The house is quieter now, but not empty. I rearranged furniture. Painted the guest room. Took down the old string lights and replaced them with a bookshelf. Started sleeping better. Woke up easier. Ate slower. Things that used to feel like background noise, the hum of the fridge, the sound of birds outside in the morning, all started to feel like real life again. I started running. Just a few blocks at first, then longer stretches. It helped. Not because I was chasing anything, but because I'd spent so long standing still. There's peace in knowing you survived something that tried to hollow you out. There's power in deciding what you'll never tolerate again. And there's something deeply grounding in realizing that the love I gave wasn't wasted, even if she didn't deserve it. It proved I was capable of showing up. Of staying loyal. Of being real. Now, I just know better who's worth giving that to.